Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I think I'm last before our keynote speaker. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I am very grateful that I got set up to tell you about the name of my company. The name of my company is Karma, the Karma Agency, and our theme of our company is consequential ideas and actions. Is something okay? I'm very forward-thinking. That's very funny. I have no idea. Okay. So I am not a scholar, but I am a practitioner. And what you'll see from today will show that I'm not a scholar, but I'm hoping that I might inspire some scholarship from this conversation. And it comes from being on the front lines of business and dealing with really very real communications issues. I'm going to share a story that's actually based in something that is going on right as we speak. It's a project that I'm currently involved in. It's been going on for a few years now, and it's getting more and more complex. So with that, I'm going to start, and I'm just going to set a little context, just a little context. It's kind of a big, wide, complicated story. I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can, and then get it to a place where maybe we can have a little conversation. So the world needs good food, and this is a really important concept, right? We know who would argue with this idea. Food is the largest industry in the world, and it is a $5 trillion industry, and it is an extremely political industry and extremely polarizing. As big as the food industry is, the food information business is growing by leaps and bounds every single day. And in a world where anyone can declare themselves a subject matter expert, publish, earn authority, scientific journals and science reporting must uphold the highest standards of publishing and journalism. So here's the problem. The problem is perception is reference dependent. Science journalism is declining. Science journals are failing to uphold standards for peer review research. Celebrity is more powerful than science. Food issues are framed to organize ideas, establish authority, create relevance, and deflect bias. In 1989, there were 95 weekly science sections in newspapers. By 2005, that number dropped to 34. In 2012, there were 19. Last year, CNN fired its entire science team. Blogs are filling the science journalism void. This is called Retraction Watch. Just this year, 30+ papers were flagged because the editors may have subverted the peer review process. So if you don't know what peer review journals are, all the doctors will know this here, the PhDs. But as students, research papers, scientific work, it's very important to have them submitted to journals and have those journals peer reviewed. And if you publish, it is very valuable and it's important. Your work is considered very important then. And so this process has been a part of academia forever, and it's been something that's been very important to journalism because much of what goes into mainstream media comes from scientific papers and research. So it first gets published in a journal and then goes to what I would call opinion elite, like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and then from there it goes into mainstream media. So this is a problem. The food babe, Vani Hari, many of you know her, has declared herself a subject matter expert on food science, but she is a technologist. She is not a scientist. Yesterday, Google results, there were 451 million science blogs, 378 million food blogs, 36,400,000 organics food blogs. That was from yesterday. All these organizations and many, many, many more are paying attention to food and science. Every single day you are hearing something about food and science. You're hearing about GMOs. You're hearing about all kinds of things in our diet every single day. And that information is coming from many places. So I'm going to tell you a story about one ingredient and kind of a very interesting, almost ironic story. This ingredient is called Carrageenan. It is produced by many global chemical companies that believe that they are truly socially responsible. DuPont, FMC, Cargill, CTS in China, others. This product is very simply seaweed. It is grown in seaweed farms all over the world, mostly in warm winter waters in places like Indonesia, Thailand, a whole range of countries. China has a big Carrageenan industry. It is nothing more than seaweed. It is taken and it's been used in food for nearly 1,000 years. The name comes from a mountain in Ireland where they harvested seaweed and they used the Carrageenan, which they took out of the seaweed, to thicken pudding. And what it actually is an emulsifier, thickener, and it suspends nutrients in food. So when you get yogurt, why yogurt doesn't fall apart is because of Carrageenan. So anyway, this food ingredient is kind of really interesting. It's in thousands and thousands of products and very important to shelf stabilization and nutrition suspension. So it is produced by seaweed farmers in these small towns all over the Philippines, Indonesia, and other places, as I mentioned. These are very small aquaculture farmers. They sell their product to the big companies that process it, and the processing is very, very simple. 90% of this is coming from floating farms away from coral reefs and other places, and it's really an interesting product because it is completely sustainable, and we're relying on aquaculture to help build economies. And the actual wage of the people that are seaweed farmers is much higher than the average person where they're living. They're able to educate their children, provide reasonable livelihoods, and you can see it's just a big industry in lots of places like in Cebu in the Philippines. So this is how it's processed, and this is straight up from toxicology. This is not, any kind of corporate speak. They take the seaweed, they basically put it with an alkaline, it's a lye. They process it very simply. It gets filtered just like coffee gets filtered. It gets dried out, it gets chopped up and milled and turns into powder. And it looks like pallets of cocaine, frankly, when it's shipped. You can see this is not on coral reefs or anything. They're just out floating. And they use bottles. They use water bottles that they recycle to make the floating. So here's the challenge. This product has been under fire now for several years. And it's been under fire by a group called the Cornucopia Institute. And they say of themselves that they are there for protecting the economic justice of organic farmers. It's an organization based in Wisconsin. And believe it or not, this small organization has been able to influence people all over the country and the world that Carrageenan is not safe. Now, they are actually a trade association for organics farmers. They have as much special interest in this as anybody else. And what is kind of interesting is they're trying to protect the special interest of small organics farmers in basically the United States. Vermont, Wisconsin, those types of places where organic farming. And organic farming is really important. It's a wonderful thing, and eating organic is really a fantastic thing. But we cannot sustain the world on organic food at this time. So their mission is not any different than the missions of all of these people living in other places in the world. But their myopic view is just of the United States. They really only care about what's going on in the United States. So what they've done is they have worked very, very hard to find a single scientist who would produce papers, scientific research papers, that would try and say that this product is unhealthy. And so she has done this. She has funding from NIH. She has funding from the Veterans Administration, other universities, and she's producing papers, 4 of them so far. In each of these papers, she has come up with some different varying results suggesting that Carrageenan can cause things like irritable bowel syndrome and things like that. And they are fighting very hard to get this product removed from all kinds of products in the United States. But what the truth of the matter is, she is the only friendly scientists with a huge body of work from independent scientists around the world, and also sanctioned by JECFA in Europe and the FDA and many other regulatory bodies, that this product is safe. But they have successfully used social media to convince others that this product is not safe, and people are buying into it, to the point where this ingredient is in things like almond milk, and manufacturers of almond milk are reformulating, not because they believe it's unsafe, but because consumers believe it is unsafe. So here's a press release from just September, when the FAO-WHO the JECFA committee released its study on Carrageenan, saying it's actually so safe it's even good for infant formula. Now, here's the rub. This letter came to Dr. Tabachman, and it also went to the independent toxicologist that tried to replicate her study. They're using good laboratory practices, and they could not replicate her study. When the letter came, what it told them is, and also she got the exact same information, that the cell lines that they had purchased to conduct these research studies were bad cell lines. They're mucosal cell lines because they were testing to replicate what goes on in your stomach lining. And these mucosal cell lines were really damaged, and there were many things that were wrong with them. So 2 independent toxicologists reviewed this information, went back to their own studies around Carrageenan. They then wrote to the 7 science journals that published Dr. Tabachman's work, provided a copy of this letter from Incel, and all 7 of those science journals rejected retraction. So here we are in this situation where we know that the study is bad, the science journals don't want to do anything about it, and the public is continuing to believe something about an ingredient that's false. So here's a few things I'd like to consider, and what I'm really concerned about in the integrity of science and journalism. So we have to agree that science is important to meeting global food supply. There's no way we're going to meet global food supply with 7 billion people without science. It has to be safe science, it has to be sound science, it has to be good products that is healthy and good for us, but we need science. The consequences of junk science, this one scientist, this one rogue scientist has been able to actually influence all these people, is affecting consumer beliefs and behaviors, which is now changing what organizations like the people that are producing almond milk are putting into they're actually reformulating. That's going to have a huge effect all the way back on those seaweed farmers in Indonesia. It's a major part of their economy there. So those people are going to really be suffering from this. It's going to affect policy decisions, because regulators are one thing, but the legislators who influence the regulators are going to have this impact of wanting to do what their constituents want them to do. So it's going to affect policy decisions. This economic and social justice, well, this small organization, Cornucopia Institute, is worrying about their economic justice, when in fact economic justice is not parochial. It is a much bigger, larger story. All of this is fueling the polarization of food in the economy, which is not helping anyone. Industry-funded science is not inherently corrupt. So this goes to your point about corporate social responsibility. Most people are not Mr. Burns in a factory doing corrupt things, making products to poison all of us. Industry is producing positive things every single day, and without industry-funded science, most of what we have today that are really important scientific developments would not be here. Think of Kevlar and protective vest at DuPont. That was industry-funded science. And so we have to get off this idea that all industry-funded science is corrupt. It's not. We have to be thoughtful about it. We have to be aware, and we have to have knowledgeable reporting. Fear-mongering is a huge opportunity in media. Media enjoys fear-mongering because it gets them readers, and so they're able to use that. U.S. organic trade associations are blind to the global impact of cause. I really just sort of talked about it. Social media content has eclipsed rational dialogue often, and that's why these science blogs are a challenge, because people are writing science blogs that aren't qualified to write these science blogs. So what my theory here is that media needs to restore knowledge-based science journalism. People that really understand how to report and write about science and understand science so that they can engage in the proper questions around scientific studies and not just accept on blind faith what a scientist reports to them. Another really important point I think here is that balance is not the objective in science reporting, because a balanced story says there's 2 points of view, but science isn't about 2 points of view. Science is about looking at information and understanding what the answers are, right? So this idea of balanced journalism in science is a false understanding. So my final thought here, and then I maybe can take a couple of questions. In communications, claiming to be on the side of the angels is not a pass to on acting responsibility or speaking responsibly. And my suggestion here is this cornucopia institute has put itself in this place with this one scientist, and they are failing to act responsibly. That scientist herself had that same letter that the other scientists. She should have raised her hand, she should have gone to those journals, and she should have said, I need to redo these studies. And she didn't do it. And so, because she is being funded by organics trade organizations. So organic sounds like the sort of side of the angels, right? Because organic is supposed to be so healthy. But in fact, we have to get behind this information to really understand what is right. And that's why high integrity in scientific journalism is going to become increasingly important, and we have to start to argue to have it back in our coverage. So that's all I have.
Welcome. We'd like to take some questions for Ms. Allison and Dr. Wang, please.
Let me just turn this off. Thanks.
Try my best to put this back in English. Okay. 谢谢你来，非常。OK。这个夏天，我去上海旅行，我很喜欢，看起来，你们受欧美的影响，你觉不觉得美国受中国的影响？So I noticed that Shanghai is very westernized, but I want to know if he sees that America is receiving Chinese influences.
这个问题我很能理解。现在的话，应该说上海肯定会受到比较多的受比较美国啊、欧洲的一些大城市的影响，因为我们
I really understand your question, because Shanghai right now is really influenced by the U.S. and other European cities.
因为我们在很多的方面实际上是在向美国学习的，特别在科技方面，包括城市管理，包括是你们的一些政治方面的一些制度啊，特别是法律方面的，我们在学习。
So right now, Shanghai is trying to learn a lot from Western states, countries, especially in terms of technology, city management, policymaking, and law.
但是就像刚才我讲到，就是说，比如上海提出了一个全球文明城市的这么个远景目标，实际上我们也希望某一天，也是30年以后，我们有很多东西可以让美国啊，这个纽约来学习的。
So, as I mentioned, at Shanghai right now, we have the project of global civilized city, and we hope that we can have more influence in the next 30 years.
这个包括可能在一些科技方面，我们也希望能够不断的有一种创造发明，甚至包括在社会治理方面，我们也会有一些新的创造发明。
So, including such aspects as technology, even societal management, we want to have something new, creative, so that other, Western foreigners can learn from that.
So economics, finance, technology, all of those subjects have skilled journalists who understand those subjects, reporting on those. But science has very few. There are still some very good ones at the New York Times, there's some at the Wall Street Journal, there's some at some of the publications like Time Magazine. But there is not an appetite among citizens to read science and to understand it. And they just default to whatever the common sort of trend is or information that's going on around there. And so what I think is that educated people need to demand science reporting. And because if we don't, it's just going to keep getting winnowed down more and more, and it's just going to appear on blogs. And the problem with blogs are two things. I think they're great, and I blog myself. But the problem with blogs for me is that you don't know the qualifications of the people that are writing those blogs, and it could just be mere opinion based on absolutely nothing. And the second thing is, it's not presented in mainstream media. You have to look for that. You have to be interested in the subject, and you have to go and you have to find it. And so the opportunity to really understand something that's really important to, in science, global warming, any kind of thing like that, that is not being properly reported on, is really hurting us as a society. And so I think that's really an important thing. We have to, as citizens, start to demand better science journalism. Rosa.
So to combat.
Follow-up, I think.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I guess then how do we, like, for people who aren't educated or for people who may not have an interest in science or something like that, how do you think that you inspire people or get people to want to read that? Because I guess there's like been a movement of like soft news and like movement where all we want to read is like either about murder or about entertainment. And so how do you suggest that there's an inspiration or a movement back towards science?
So there is this sort of anti-intellectualism movement, right? And social media is not helping us. Although it's fun and it's great, it's not helping us. And so I think that all of you, you're here, you're students, you're smart, you're learning. Most of you that are probably here are in liberal arts. The value of that education has to be important enough for you to talk about it. Important enough for it to become part of the dialogue, not that you're bragging about your education, but being interested in subjects that are intellectually courageous and talking about things that matter. And so I think that's part of what will help people realize what there's an appetite for.
This is a bit of a follow-up. I like that answer, by the way. I'm wondering, do you take the position of the celebrities that you talked about, like companies and celebrities, but Dr. Oz or Andrew Wild and people believe in them who, maybe
So it's interesting. So Dr. Weil is one of the doctors that actually is an anti-Carrageenan doctor and writes for Prevention Magazine about it and other places, anything related to Rodale Press. But and Dr. Oz, he's now on his cathartic season. He's going to tell the truth, and he's going to start telling people that he's really going to be science-oriented, and he's just going to reveal things. So we're actually toying with the idea of bringing this as having a panel on Dr. Oz and seeing how legitimate he is about talking about this from a scientific perspective. So.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, for your presentation. I'm really fascinated by the idea of Shanghai as is, to use your term, global civilized city. But I was curious about the very choice of that term, especially the civilized there. What is the context in which that particular phrasing, instead of, say, a global city, which one can also understand in that kind of cosmopolitan global sense, but why the qualification there, civilized or civilization?
首先感谢您的演讲，他对这个非常感兴趣，但是他对这个说上海是全球文明城市这个词有一个特别的问号，为什么说全球城市就不可以呢？为什么全球文明城市这个文明到底加上去是为什么？
这个是因为全球城市呢，它有一个特定的这个界定的，它主要是侧重在这个比方说资本市场的对全球的影响力，侧重在这个大的跨 跨国公司、各类的全球性机构的一个集聚，然后当侧重在这个它的科技创新的这种策源地这么一种，它有特定的界定。然后我们呢，就是就是也希望在研究上能够比全球城市往前跨一步啊。然后呢，所以我们因为全球文明城它除了全球城市那些功能以外，所以我们特别还提到了包括治理的文明，包括文化的融合，是引入了这么一些内涵。
So for global city right now, the definition includes such aspects as capital and economic influence in the global environment, and also technology, resources, multinational companies, more about materialistic aspects. So these are definitions for global city. We want to go one step further. For global civilized city, we want to, as you mentioned, self-management, cultural integration, and this kind of soft concepts into it.
另外呢，我们在研究当中也是基于，因为现在也好，未来也好，是一个大城市发展的时代。那么大城市有各种各样的大城市，那么我们也不是说，如果全球城市光集中在对叫那个要素资本的一种全球影响力，我觉得对其他城市不一定有广泛的影响力的这个借鉴的意义。所以我们也希望能够有一种对其他的城市有一些可以共同借鉴的一种新的一种城市发展模式。
And the other aspect about global civilized city is that right now or in future, we look at the super cities. So they have to be certain large enough scales and influences. And not only just getting to one of the global civilized cities, and we want to be the model city for other smaller scale cities, so that they can look after what they can achieve.
而且我们特别强调我们这种超大型城市，这个在美洲、欧洲可能特别是美洲不一定能很多，但是在亚洲有很多城市都是人口规模非常大非常大。这些人口规模大的城市未来怎么样子更好的发展，需要有一种我们上海希望能够探索出一种好的模式出来。
So when we talk about the super scale cities, and right now in the American continents, Americas, we don't really see such huge cities with such dense populations, but in Asia we have a lot of super scale cities. So Shanghai wants to be one of the model cities for them.
这个是非常感谢他的提问。
And thank you so much for your question.
欢迎你到上海来，我们更好的直接交流。
You're welcome to visit Shanghai, and we'd love to have a conversation with you.
We can do 2 more questions maybe.
Kate, I wanted to ask one quick question followed by a long question. One is, when I go to the Asian fusion restaurant, should I order seaweed salad or not?
I love seaweed salad.
Second is, when you were saying that one scientist is doing this and it's contradictory to establish wisdom in the field, I think I understand that, but why hasn't that study been repeated? And second, when you say science is neutral, it's not really neutral unless you are looking at force in a chemical experiment, whether it explodes or not. When you have some interpretation involved, there is plenty of margin of error on how much you are willing to tolerate. Certainly in the case of food and organic industry or non-organic, there is plenty of, it's very error prone in terms of what the researcher himself or herself thinks about and who's funding. There are a lot of these nefarious elements that get in. So I'm not so sure whether to state an experiment as it is would solve the purpose. I think it's important to explain those things in a plain language. I think somebody asked here, make it simple for a lot of people to understand. So
I agree with that.
I agree that this one scientist will have to be replicated, or
Right.
Reliability is low. But science in this field is not really that neutral.
So no, it's not neutral, and there's a body of work going back to the 1970s that has been testing this, and it's been done by independent scientists, not necessarily these companies, because they have to pass these regulatory programs. And the thing is that 2 of these companies have continued to test these materials all the way through this year. And each of these studies have continued to produce the similar results. And an independent Harvard study showed again that this product does not have any detrimental effects on the gut. And they even, in the most recent study, I mean, I'm going to bore you all, but it was a piglet study, and the piglet is most common, their digestive system is most closely linked to a human digestive system at infancy, and that was about infant formula. So all this body of work is continuing to substantiate that this ingredient, because it is not actually digested, it's a soluble fiber, passes through your system and there's no harm to the human. This one scientist has just these sets of things. Several toxicologists have tried to replicate her studies, and these studies cannot be replicated. And so the fact that they've even invited her to co-conduct these studies with her, and she has refused to do that. So that part of the story makes you say, okay, why is she refusing? If she is really dedicated to knowing the answer to this, why is she refusing to co-produce another study? I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. I think, can I just, I was reading these reports that the FDA, for example, these drug companies, they have figured out how to increase the probability. I mean, I'm talking about the drug companies, pharmaceuticals, because, you know, it deals with health and things. So what they're doing is they're really using biased samples. They're not really going and randomly, you know, putting together a group. They're very careful. And over the past 10 years, that has increased the probability of FDA approval by 100, 200%. So
I just read an article about that yesterday.
right?
Yeah.
So nobody's really asking the real question about who are these people you are testing this on?
Right.
Who are you experimenting these things on?
And that's my very point about why we need sound science journalism. So it's not whether the company is right or the Organics Trade Association is right, it's whether we have enough science journalism to help the American public have the information they need to be able to make smart decisions. That's really what the point is.
I think you're going to bring us back into the ethical place.
It's just a very, very quick, no, it's more about journalism. I'm a former journalist. Very quick point, which is, I agree with everything you said. It's not only about science journalism though. In this instance, it can just be about regular reporting as well. And this is where I see journalism as in the watchdog role, you know, watchdog of society. That's the traditional role. It's not doing that now simply because there is so much commodification of news. These are corporations. So your organization may want to do that kind of media relations. It doesn't have to be science journalism. It can be regular journalism in terms of the shenaniganism of this particular anyway.
So we're closing this session. There will be